Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today, sponsored by Interactive Brokers. It's Wednesday, September 16th, and we are live from the Investors Business Daily Studios in Los Angeles. On today's show, we're going to be taking a look at some of the headlines that hit stocks this weekend. Specifically, we'll look at Northrop Grumman, a defense stock, also what happened to oil stocks, a lot of big movements there, so we'll look at an ETF, and also a breakout in Toll Brothers. But first, let's take a look at the major market indexes. It's Justin Nielsen along with Ed Carson, and Ed, I think the moral of the story today is how resilient the markets have been. The NASDAQ composite only closed down about 0.3%, S&P 500 down 0.3%, Dow Jones Industrials about 0.5% down, and the Russell 2000, again, kind of bucking the trend, up 0.4%. So what happened and what didn't happen, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's like the big news over the weekend was a big attack on a Saudi facility, cut half of Saudi production, really cut out 5% of the world's crude supply. You know, oil prices went up 15% today, a massive move, biggest in years. But really from the, if you look at the stock market, you'd barely know that anything happened. I mean, sort of like last week when there was tons of sector turmoil, the market just sort of cruises along. Okay, we're down a little bit, but we're basically at record highs for the S&P, the NASDAQ, and Dow. So, pretty positive action. Also, we sort of forget about it. General Motors, a strike is underway. That stock sold off, but really, that could be bad news for the Midwest, in manufacturing. But the economy just sort of shrugs, the stock market just sort of shrugged it off today. So that's a positive sign.
Yeah, and we're staying above all of those support levels that we've been talking about, above the 50-day. The S&P 500 closed just slightly below that 3,000 level, and the NASDAQ is well above that 8,000 level that we've been talking about. So again, it's not, you look at the indexes and it doesn't look like anything happened, really.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the individual stocks. So on the defense side, there was a lot of movement, and of course, that they were already kind of doing okay, so maybe some of the headlines kind of helped there. And let's take a look at Northrop Grumman.
Yeah, I mean, some of the headlines are, the U.S. is accusing Iran of being involved, and that obviously could raise tensions, and you might think to be buying some defense stocks. But as I said, defense stocks have been doing well. A few days ago, it rebounded from its 50-day line. It sort of continued to do that. On a weekly chart, it's got a flat base buy point. The relative strength line is doing very well. I know that today it was the stock of the day as well, and meanwhile, L3 Harris Technologies, I was added to Swing Trader today. That's been doing well. It's been a strong group, decent growth, and while some other names have really sold off, this has held up pretty well.
Yeah, and so there was kind of a wild day, a few days last week.
Yeah.
Same thing with L3 Harris, and that was kind of the support at the 50-day moving average line, and now we're looking at about a 377.44 buy point for that flat base that it's made. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to Toll Brothers. Now, Toll Brothers, I don't know where this came from, but this breakout was very strong. I was looking at the home builders. There wasn't much movement elsewhere in the industry. What happened with Toll Brothers? I
mean, sometimes price action, just moves the stock before you see the news. Toll Brothers is an entry-level luxury home builder, I think like $500,000 to $1 million or $500,000 to $750,000. And, the builders have been doing reasonably well, and insulation companies, a lot of that. But there wasn't much movement today, as you're saying. It just surged past a buy point. It had been sort of moving toward it. That just sometimes happens. And, this is one reason why you have watch lists and you're paying attention, because a lot of people talk about Toll Brothers, but it's why you go through your screens and you pay attention, you look at them. So, you come across when that crosses an alert, you're ready to act if you're interested in that stock. I mean, some of these stocks have some fundamental issues and stuff, but the group has been doing very well.
Yeah, and Toll Brothers does have a composite rating of 91, so this is one that was legitimately potentially on your watch list, and it was in that near pivot area, just below the pivot of around 39.68, and a lot of volume behind the movement today. So up 5%. Now let's go ahead and switch over to oil. Oil, of course, was the big news, the big mover today, as you mentioned, up like 15%. Now, there's a lot of different ways to play that. Or do you play it at all? Because this is something that's been down quite a bit. Is today enough action to say, hey, maybe this is a buy here?
I mean, you really just don't know. I mean, it's tricky to say, like, you're sort of buying. It's up 15% today. It depends on how quickly Saudi production comes back. I mean, maybe there will be a longer-term geopolitical sort of risk factor in there, but this, it could come back if production doesn't come back, or if there's further attacks, or if the U.S. starts threatening military strikes against Iran. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios where you could see oil go up a lot higher, a lot lower. it's just difficult to know. You're making sort of a bet, and you can do it a variety of ways. We're looking at OIH. This is an ETF that tracks oil services companies. There's a lot of ETFs, and one of the nice things about ETFs in general is that you can then avoid the stock-specific risk. I mean, you don't know if something horrible happens to a particular company, it's coming down, but you can still, it's still going to be volatile. OIH is, that's one. There's USO, which tracks crude oil.
The spot price.
Spot price. XLE tracks sort of the S&P 500 energy companies in general. So a lot of things there. So this one went up really sharply. It's just sort of different ways of playing it.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, these different ETFs give you different ways of maybe targeting. What is it that you want to target? You want to target specifically the oil prices, or are you trying to target the companies, which OIH is doing, the oil service companies?
There's a lot of overlap on that. One of the nice things is that you don't necessarily have to buy it on a buy point. You can trade it like a stock if you want to, but sometimes, like we've talked about the chip stocks, there's some chip stocks moving. Which one? It's like, well, you could just buy SMH, as we said.
Buy them all.
buy them all. So ETFs definitely have a good role to play.
Yeah. And speaking of which, just a few things that you should know that are coming up. We actually do have an ETF webinar. It's called the ETF Playbook. That webinar will be at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, tomorrow, September 17th. That'll be myself and Mike Webster on that webinar. We also have another show dropping for investing strategies. That'll be dropping tomorrow with Allie out in New York, and that's at investors.com/investing strategies. So make sure to check that out, and also our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. So please engage with us in any of those social media platforms. And that'll do it for us today. Thank you very much for watching.